Welcome to Drupal Pupils. Join us as we bring together avid Drupal enthusiasts in a laid-back fireside setting. Today's show is proudly sponsored by Cheppers, your one-stop Drupal shop, where expertise meets innovation, and AcroCommerce, a digital commerce agency that leverages the power of Drupal to conquer B2B's most complex e-commerce challenges. Whether you're new to Drupal or fine-tuning your mastery, this is the place to be. So sit back, tune in, and please feel free to comment with any questions we might have missed along the way. Thank you. All right, Jared, I'll let you go ahead and get things started.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so I typically just give an overview of Drupal Pupils. We are a new get-together, kind of a podcast, kind of a group. And the idea of Drupal Pupils is that Drupal enthusiasts can come together. We can talk about what's hot in the world of Drupal. We can talk with people that are active and contributing and doing cool things. And that includes people like Adam, who I think a lot of people are familiar with the Drupal 10 Masterclass. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. When I was talking with Patrick before the holidays, he's like, okay, I've ordered the book. I'm going to read it. And I was thinking, okay, well, like I had already read part of the intro because there's a preview, I think, on Google Books. And by the time I reached out to you, Adam, I had just read like part of those foundational concepts, and then like the part about the Lego and like how we think about Drupal. And I was like, I needed this so long ago because I've for years been trying to explain Drupal, and yeah, maybe like try to work off of a Lego analogy, but really like to really think about Drupal as a tool and the way you explain it so simply opened my mind. And I was like, okay, we got to get Adam on the show. And so I reached out immediately after that, and you were very receptive. So thank you. And yeah, even if a lot of people aren't able to join at this time, I think this will be a Drupal Pupils that a lot of people tune into on YouTube when we post the recording. So excited to promote it afterward. Patrick, that's all I think I have to ramble on about that, and happy for you guys to take over.
Awesome. Well, welcome everyone, and Adam, excited to have you here today. Are you ready to get started off with a little game, a little Drupal rapid fire? It's on your book though, so you should get 3 out of 3.
I'm ready.
Okay.
I hope I ace it. Now, if you ask me about Mike Herschel's chapter, then I might fail. But that's
we did not. We kept it to the chapters we're gonna go through today. So
all right,
yeah,
awesome.
I think we should be good. Jared, you got a timer?
Yes, I do.
All right.
I know
cool.
You told me to have this ready, and I had it almost ready.
You're good.
Okay, so 30 seconds on the clock, right?
Yes.
Do you guys want to see the time, or just it's gonna alert you when it's done?
Should be good. I think we'll hear it.
Okay, Adam, 30 seconds and go.
All right. Drupal core leverages Symfony as a framework for what underlying capabilities? Name one.
Dependency injection.
Correct. Any entity that has fields is known as what?
Fieldable.
Yes, correct. Question 3. The blank section in displays allows for configuring the amount of content returned and the controls to paginate. What section?
Views.
I'll give you another try.
Sorry, say it again.
I'll say it again. The blank section in displays allows for configuring the amount of content returned and the controls to paginate.
Display type settings. No.
One more try.
Well, views has pagination. That's not right. Did I screw that up?
There's a specific term that you included in the book. I just took it right from the sentence.
I don't know. I think I'm going 2 for 3 because my 30 seconds has to be just about up. Right?
Yeah, I had such a light little alarm clock because I don't like to wake up to loud noises. So it did go.
It was a pager.
Pager? Oh God. Okay.
It was pager. Yes, pager.
Sorry. See, even the people that can write the book still get caught up in all the Drupal terminology, right?
That is true. Yeah, I was like, you know what? I was like, I'm taking this off from like vocab words. I think that's probably the best way to go about these questions.
I've also been like off from my job for like the last 3.5 weeks right now. So my brain's maybe just not quite as on as it normally is, but
breaking off the rust.
Yeah. Eggnog.
Yeah.
I was talking to a guy yesterday and said the holidays, it's kind of like you throw everything out of your brain into the air and then you come back and you're grabbing one piece at a time and then you put it back together slowly.
That's a good explanation for the holidays. Yeah. That's a good way to put it. Very cool. Awesome.
I'll still take 2 for 3 though. That's it's better than 0.
That'll get you through school. You can go out into the working world with 67%.
Very true. Very true. All right, Adam. Let's get into it. All right, cool. So I want to ask you. Let's talk about first your experience. I understand you've been a professor, so let's go into that and talk about your history in higher ed.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel like I've done a little bit of everything. I graduated with an undergrad from Juniata College in computer science and web development, and kind of started getting into doing some like client engagement work and consulting type stuff, and building custom apps. But then pretty quickly pivoted to higher education. I worked at Penn State for like 8 or 9 years or something like that, and ended up kind of like being the doing everything that Penn State offered. I was like teaching classes. I worked full time for like their IT department, and then I also like got my master's all at the same time. So it was pretty cool. It was a fun experience. And while I was doing that, I also just was doing these adjunct courses. And one of which I think is very relevant to like what we're talking about is around, the basics of like introduction to databases and stuff like that. Right. So kind of dabbled in that a lot. And and then during my time at Penn State was really where I started, with Drupal. I think that was at the time it was probably close to Drupal 6, I'm guessing at that point. And I didn't know squat about the community or anything, and it's like, oh, what's this Drupal thing? And ended up picking it up, and but yeah, it was pretty cool. So like I used Drupal. I was adopting it and building stuff with it before I ever had like a profile on Drupal.org or anything like that. So yeah, pretty cool.
Very cool. Very cool. Listen, tell us, and I want to get into this because I think probably a lot of people have used Simply Test.me, but you are part in running this. Tell us about your history with that.
I've given a lot of talks on this and everything. So if anybody wants any like history lessons on that, like I encourage you to, probably scour through YouTube or whatever. I've given talks at like Drupadelphia and even DrupalCon and stuff about Simply Test, from, both the history of it and also like the modernization effort we went through. But I would say, I don't even know how long now, several years ago, the original maintainer like just said, hey, I kind of want to move on, and I'm not doing a good job of like, maintaining this any longer. I'm not interested in it. And, it kind of like had accrued a lot of like technical debt and just ended up being kind of monolithic in how it was built. And, stuff was like going down a lot and stuff. So, but I really felt like it was, a very important asset for the community. Like there isn't too many things that I'm aware of, at least, that you can very easily test patches or just try out certain projects or modules or themes or anything like that. So, so I picked it up, and, and I would say it's been probably, I don't know, maybe a good like year and a half, maybe 2 years, just kind of like keeping the lights on with it. Trying to clean up small things to keep it running and let it, kind of do its thing. But at the same time, kind of try to figure out like how to rebuild it. And we ended up, and believe me, I had a lot of really good help. So like, that's why I use the word we and not me.
Yeah.
But I had, aspirations of it being more container driven, more cloud based, also like, using much more modern practices, like, decoupled Drupal practices, things like that. So we built it all with React.js. We built it all on top of, at the time, I think it's Drupal 9 now, and completely gutted all the hosting and stuff. The folks from Amazy donated some hosting for it, which was cool. And the folks from Tugboat donate the backend for Simply Test. They you can spin up little, in their world, they call them sandboxes or whatever, but but we use them as like the instances that people use, and they use Simply Test Me. And that's also, it's run by the Lullabot team for those that aren't familiar, but it's a great product, all container driven, and really nice. So now it's been completely modernized. I feel like I've had a lot more free time from it, but I'm still like traumatized from some of the days where, kept going down on like a Saturday morning and I'm like, oh God, no, like I wanted to have a weekend. Right. And, but yeah, no, all good on that front. Yeah.
No, it's cool. I since, April, when I got hired by Cheppers, I've heard a lot of people talk about it. Like a lot of people play in there, right? You're able to do stuff without downloading stuff. So it's something that I've heard a lot about. And then when you told me about it, I was like, oh, this is super cool. I'm definitely going to ask you more about that. So
yeah, I've written blog posts about it. I've given talks. So like, by all means, if anybody's more curious about more of those details, it's there's a lengthy story behind it. So
cool. That's awesome. And then what are you doing currently?
So I currently work at Red Hat. I oversee a lot of their developer products. So I'm like, my title is like director of engineering, but we have a whole portfolio of different like products that we build for that serve developers everywhere from, things that run on people's local systems, the whole way through like, tools and to do deployments and everything on top of cloud infrastructures, Kubernetes, OpenShift, things like that. So yeah, really, really cool. Like a great position. Like I learned something every single day and got an awesome team. We have about 200 some people, 250 people that work for me, span like UI technologies and local systems, local tooling and DevOps stuff. And yeah, pretty exciting stuff. So yeah.
That's awesome. Cool. And then I have to ask you this because the noise has calmed down, but Adam is above a coffee shop. Do they pay for the office, or, is this your office?
Oh, no, I pay for it. This is,
wow, cool.
Yeah. So I actually, I've been doing remote work for, he's probably going on like 13 or 14 years now, before COVID, before it became more popular. But having young kids at home and like, I have a dog and he likes to like bark and do all kinds of fun stuff. Yeah. I could say being at home and trying to do that has some, challenges. My youngest daughter is just notorious for like, walking downstairs in the middle of Zoom calls and just like, hey, I'm here. Right. So it was, kind of, the office was a really nice, definitely worth the money and everything to get it, just have a nice quiet space, to work through things. So
totally agree. I do like getting to the office downtown in Minneapolis and working and not being at home with the dogs and stuff. So no, totally get it. All right. So we're going to move on to kind of your process with the book, motivations, audience. So tell us kind of why you wrote it and then who is it for?
Yeah. So, I've done a lot in Drupal so far. I mean, I think, even Jim will tell you, like he and I go way back. But, I feel like I've done practically everything. Like I've, written modules. I've, like done governance work. I've given talks at like, international conferences. And I feel like, on my bucket list somewhere was like, hey, I think I want to write a book someday. And I was approached by a publisher to do that. And, I think my real motivation behind it, though, truly was around, trying to kind of like have the next generation of people that kind of can come up and learn about Drupal and really like have some of the same types of opportunities that I was given whenever I, joined the community and started doing work inside of Drupal. I feel like it was immensely beneficial for me, both in terms of like learning and career opportunities and everything. And, I think, if you look at like some of the conventional opportunities, right? Like, you look at doing core development or, resolving issues in issue queues, you need a basis to understand these things, right? It's like the community is not something that's just, you could just immediately jump in and, all of a sudden, you're good to go. I think it does have, honestly, a little bit of a learning curve to it. And I think, I didn't really see or find anything that I thought, at least recently kind of would make efforts to sort of lower that learning curve or do that. But at the same time, even with Simply Test Me as well, like, I've tried to sort of leave my mark on the community as one that's very passionate about serving that audience, right? People that, aren't familiar with Drupal and want to have, the same opportunities that I had. And Simply Test is great for that technically, because people can like, I want to like write this patch and I need a quick way to test it. But then you don't need to understand the infrastructure. You don't need to understand all the underlying nuances or drush or things like that, right? So I wanted, but the book is definitely one that that was exclusively what my motivation was, is like, hey, if this can help somebody start their career and it helps serve the community and grow the community, and those things are symbiotic, then it seems like a great way to give back.
No, cool. I love that. Yeah, it's a huge push in the Drupal community too, right? To get new people, get new developers involved. So yeah, no, that's super cool. Let's get into the process a little bit. So where are you starting at when you're approached by this publisher? What's your starting point?
Yeah, honestly, there was a ton of like prep work. It was a lot of like, writing a pitch and creating an outline and detailing out all the different like high level concepts that would be found in each of the chapters, and, and kind of like stubbing out the headings and the subheadings, and then going through a lot of like, approvals of that and tweaks and adjustments, and, and also like looking at the market and then surveying other books and making sure it wasn't, like, oh, there's not 17 other books that are out there that do this exact thing. Like, there was a lot of that type of stuff. I was really surprised personally by how much upfront work there was in doing that. But once that all got approved and sort of like stamped out, then, really got heavy into the writing. We had to set up getting reviewers and making sure that we had, our ducks in a row. So Rachel Norfolk, who that's her Drupal.org handle, she was the reviewer. And she's amazing, by the way. It was like such a joy working with her. She's incredible, and I also ended up reaching out. The next step was, once, we had everything in place, we started writing the chapters, which took forever, by the way. And when we did that, we did a lot of iterative reviews, and Rachel was involved in that. But, in the outline, I will tell you, I got like really nervous about, Drupal's so broad and there's so many different skills and things. And we wanted to have like a theming chapter. Theming is so important to Drupal, but I'm like, oh, I am not a theming person. Like, I like would not have done it justice, and just, know myself well enough to not do that. And so I ended up reaching out to Mike Herschel, who I'm sure some of you know. And Mike and I made a deal. So he agreed to write the chapter on theming if and only if two things were met. One, that he got money for beer, which I obliged. And secondly, that I explicitly wrote in the book that I paid him in beer.
Oh my God, that's funny.
So both things did happen. And he wrote his chapter. It was really good. Then, we did have a lot of reviews as those things were happening, both editorially and technically. Rachel picked up a lot on the technical side. then, went really heavy into cleaning up these chapters and incorporating feedback. And then finally, probably the part I thought was going to come sooner, was I went back and wrote the introduction and the different appendices that were in the book, so that was, from a high level, that was the process. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. No, it sounded like a long process. How long did it take?
This is kind of embarrassing, probably because, I have a job and a family and stuff, but it took, soup to nuts, probably 16 months.
It's not embarrassing if someone has a sneak peek of the table of contents, and I kind of just want to show that quickly, just to visually display, like, when you're talking about putting this all together. Like, this was my first view when I took a sneak peek at them, was how well laid out everything is.
Yeah.
And it just keeps going and going, and it's digestible somehow. So kudos to you. That in itself is super impressive.
Yeah, thanks. It was a lot of work for sure, but something I'm just happy that it's done, and and I hope people get a lot of value out of it. Yeah.
Wow. At 16 months, I'm actually, I thought it was going to be like 2+ years, because like Jared showed, like you got a lot of content in there. So 16 months, that's a great timeline to have.
Oh,
so
thank you.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. Awesome. So what makes this book stand out? I know we've talked a little bit about that, who it's kind of pitched for, and you kind of mentioned like the reasons why you wanted to write the book. What makes it stand out?
I think, just given the motivation, it really was designed to serve people that want to just start from nothing and learn Drupal, right? And I don't know how many other books truly have that aspiration. Like, I just don't. I haven't seen ones. I know there were ones dating back to like even Drupal 6 or maybe 7, but that's really, it feels like an eon ago, especially in terms of like how the community has evolved and everything. I also, like, when I was looking and surveying stuff, there's a lot of great depth books. Like, I know Matt Glauman has one on developing modules. There's like, ones on theming, more niche books as well on different specific topics. So, that wouldn't have stood out if I would have tried to do something like that. But yeah, I really wanted there to be like a good overview that people could just kind of start from really bare bones, right? And just take that and kind of get the information that they need and sort of build off of that in ways that they could take their own, journey more organically. I think what makes the book a little bit unique is it doesn't really assume a lot of technical knowledge, right? It's not coming at it from like, oh, web development and command line tools and Composer and Drush. No, it's very much like, okay, let's kind of like really just take a step back and be much more broad. Some of the chapters, for people that already know certain things may or they may be more relevant or less relevant. It's fine. People can kind of pick their own journey as they're sort of, reading things that they might find interesting in the book, but it's not assuming, right? I think that's one thing that kind of makes it interesting. But one thing that, for what it's worth, I've had a lot of different experiences, I guess, in the community, not just, oh, here's how you build an amazing module and put automated tests and use the framework the right way and all this stuff. But I was able to go through and really like incorporate like my experience building Drupal applications for people, or like, my experience contributing, my experience even in governance and how that works with the community, and really apply those things throughout the book organically. I feel like it's a reflection of a lot of the different things that I've learned, and because it's broad, it hits so many different spaces. Like, it's, it covers stuff from the basics of tooling to how do you do code updates and code deployments? What's a good way to look at it? How do you leverage environments? I'm a big kind of zealot around DevOps and practicing DevOps and automation. I try to incorporate as much of that philosophically into the book as I can. Also acknowledging, again, that there isn't like, it's not from a depth perspective, but more of like, okay, here's an opportunity for you to automate something. Here's a very rough like script you could write that kind of shows you a way to approach it, things like that. And so that's really about it.
No, that's also, I think as a non-technical in the Drupal community, I think it really helps me understand more of the complex concepts that I haven't gone into, right? I'm, as non-technical in the community, it really helps me understand that. So that when
you know what a pager is now.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So,
Exactly. I built the quiz questions. I know exactly what that is. Yeah. So no, yeah, cool. I think that is truly what makes the book stand out, which is super cool. So, and then I understand you're donating around a quarter of the proceeds to Girls Who Code. Talk to us about that organization, how you chose them.
Yeah. So I didn't really write. I had more altruistic, motivations behind the book. And, I don't think people strike it rich writing a technical book. It wasn't really anything that I aspired for. But, besides all the motivations that we talked about, I wanted to make sure I made a pretty clear statement around that. And so I decided to donate 25% of the proceeds of the book to Girls Who Code. And one of the main reasons is really because of my daughters. I just want to make sure that, I fundamentally believe that, that we need to advocate and help evolve and grow more, women in technology in particular. I want there to be more opportunities. I want people to have more chances to learn and to be supported. And I know Girls Who Code is just a wonderful organization. They have programs, I think, even globally that they've expanded to now. They're in a lot of major, cities that they help and run programs that help people that are even underserved, underprivileged, kind of get experience, get exposure, get some training, and help kind of, get them what they need. And it's always been a cause that, as I have had my own kids, I want them to be in a position that when they go into their careers and they, I want them to have chances. I want them to have opportunities. I want them to see and work with people. If they ever get into tech, I don't know if they will, but like, that look like them and talk to them, talk like them as well. Like, not just a bunch of old dudes like me. Right.
Yeah.
So, I want them to feel that and have, I think it's just a great organization that, I think is supporting the right things. So that was my motivation.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, representation is huge. And I think one of our future guests is actually, we're going to have a little carryover there. So that'll be super cool as well. So
great.
That's awesome. Yeah. Great organization. Cool. So we'll stop there for a quick Q&A. Does anyone have any questions kind of on Adam's process, writing the book? Anything we touched on so far? Nothing. Cool. Awesome.
Would you do it again?
Oh, yeah,
can we grab a link to the book in chat? Because I know I've seen it, but I haven't. Where's the best place to buy it?
Best place go ahead, Adam. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's on Amazon, but I wouldn't say that's probably the best place to buy it. I think it is on the publisher's website as well from Pact. It's PACKT. But I think, I mean, Amazon's a giant money factory, right? You may want to find, if you could order it from like a local bookstore or something and support them, I think that would be my preference. But otherwise you could look for it on the site.
Right.
That's actually cool. Well, actually, maybe we'll generate some links to share after. Jared, I don't know if you want to share one right now, but local bookstores, that's a great. If we can compile a list of that, that'd be cool.
Absolutely, and definitely going to promote that. 25% is going towards Girls Who Code. I love that. I've got a couple daughters myself, so totally understand motivation there. And I do want to hear the answer to Jim's question. Would you do it again? That's always a good hindsight question.
You know, it's a complicated thing, right? I would say that it definitely is not an easy task to write a book. It's a lot more of a time commitment than what it might seem on the surface. You know, I think when you work full time and you have a family and you have all those things, it's probably more of a commitment than you realize, at least than I realized when I started. I probably would do it again, but I would say though that if I could do it again and it was later, like when my kids were a little older, and you know, maybe I think I had just also, like when I started writing the book, I had just started at Red Hat, so you know, kicking off a new job and getting all those things is obviously a lot to take on at once. But I think, but it was on my bucket list of things I wanted to do. So I probably would do it again. But if I had a choice, I would say I probably would have done it maybe like a little later in life. Just things might be a little calmer. Yeah.
I can imagine that. Anyone with young kids, Jared, myself.
Yeah. Well, that's how you explain that, Adam, is how I explain the Disney trip when we drove down from Alberta, Canada, all the way down to Disneyland, and then drove all the way back up the Oregon coast. And I looked over at my wife after it. It took us like 36 or 39 hours on the drive home, and we stopped in like parking lots where my wife was taking the daughters to the washroom in the night, and there was rats pulling pizza boxes out of garbage cans.
Oh my Lord.
But still, we got home, we looked at each other, and I asked her, I'm like, if we could like go back to Disneyland for another 2 weeks, but we had to drive there right now, would you do it? and she said yes. And I was like, surprisingly, I would too. So it's like,
there you go.
It's a weird way that our memories serve us. You remember the highlights along the way.
Yeah, and I think it's also one of those things. I think as time passes, like you can look back on things, it always looks a little bit more, you know, favorable. Like you don't always remember all the, you know, like, oh, geez, I had to like, you know, work all Sunday writing this chapter or something, right? It's like, oh, I could have used a break from, you know, the busyness of the week or something, right? Like, but you're just like, oh no, I wrote a book, it was great, right? You know, as the time goes by, you know. So, yeah,
awesome, cool, awesome. Any other questions before we get into the chapters? I think we're good. Cool. All right, Adam, let's get into so actually just to give background, we're going to cover 3 chapters. We kind of went through and say, hey, these are 3 of the most important chapters that we think we should cover. So no way are we giving you a full overview of the whole book, but 3 of the most important chapters that Adam kind of highlighted, or pinpointed, I should say. So first one, chapter 5, what is new in Drupal 10? Adam, can you give us an overview of kind of, hey, new features, and then what the chapter talks about, even a little bit outside of that?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, you know, this chapter really was focused a lot on like, okay, what exactly were the changes, you know, and it kind of even takes a step back because I think, you know, there's obviously been pretty significant sort of evolution, I would say, of like how major releases happen in Drupal, you know, even from the days of Drupal 7, the whole way up to now Drupal 10, which, you know, things are much more iterative and there's minor releases, but then it rolls right into the next major release and they do deprecations and things. So I sort of take a step back and kind of explain that at a high level. So people understand that, like, you know, hey, Drupal 10 might look a little bit like Drupal 9. It might look a little bit like Drupal 11 as well, right? You know, fundamentally. You know, but that the chapter then evolves a lot more into just kind of like what is specific inside of Drupal 10 to kind of watch out for, you know, whether it's like the platform requirements of like Symfony 6.2 or the big upgrade around CK Editor 5, which had a lot of architectural changes inside of Drupal itself, and all the platform level requirements, things like, what version of PHP do you need, and what version of MySQL is supported, and why did they pick that? It's basically like, well, they want to make sure that they're using the most recent and stable version at the time when the major release comes out. That way people aren't getting too far behind on stuff, right? And then, I kind of dive in more to like the things that are new inside of, Drupal 10. One of the major areas really are around like the theming level updates, the new admin theme, the new default theme that gets shipped with it. That's also why Mike Herschel was phenomenal at writing like that chapter on theming. Was he was really extremely vital to the efforts around, I think it was Olivero was the one that he was pitching in on. And so
can you touch on a little bit of that, like how Olivero differs from Bartik? I don't know if Mike would be better for that question, but maybe you can explain a little bit.
I could do that at a high level for sure. I think one of the things around front end technology in particular is, and this is outside way beyond Drupal just in general, right? But front end technology is just rapidly evolving. The standards are evolving, the different frameworks are evolving. It's a very fast paced, I even kind of not very stable sort of thing. It has been for years now. I remember back, when Drupal was using like jQuery and things like that, which now are kind of like waning in favor of all the decoupled work that's going on and using these modern JavaScript frameworks, things like React and Vue and stuff like that. But it's just a insanely like exploding sort of area. And it's also like, evolving, in ways that people don't talk about all the time, like, even accessibility standards, right? Which is really near and dear to everybody in the Drupal community. And CSS is evolving, right? There's newer CSS practices and standards and new RFCs that get published all the time, right? And, if you look at like Drupal, their feature development, they take kind of like longer tails, right? Like, new features, especially ones that are significant, they don't get built overnight. Like, it's not like, it's not like there's really a sort of a great or a straightforward way to like just hurry up and incorporate some brand new JavaScript framework or some evolving CSS standard or something like that. But at the same time, those communities and those standards are just exploding, right? Like, I mean, so much going on all the time. And so these new themes, both in terms of the admin theme and the standard themes that are now built into Drupal, are really important to ensure that, kind of Drupal stays on top of those experiences and standards. And those types of, it also leverages like all the new and cool and modern things that exist. And in doing so, like, honestly, like the experience of Drupal is now better because of that, right? It looks nicer. It looks fresher. It's actually more usable. It's promoting better usability. And they have more tools at their disposal now to go and build modern interfaces because the standards have now evolved with what they've done with the new themes. And honestly, one of the things that I really love about it too is when you have something like this in core, it really sets a great example, right? And anyone that wants to develop a theme now has a good, sort of boilerplate to build off of or use, both in terms of reference, but and it brings all those modern things forward, right? So I think the new themes are immensely beneficial, both for the evaluator experience, but also for usability. All of the things. So
that's awesome. Yeah, no, that's great context. So a few of the other new features, which recipes, if you guys didn't watch the episode of the show that Jim was on with Alex Spot, plenty of information on recipes there, but also automatic updates, decoupled menus, project browser. One thing that I think is super important in automatic updates is I want to get your take on how big of an impact do you think it will have on adoption, especially for smaller businesses, which I know is huge.
I mean, I think the hope is significant, right? I think one of the things that back when, oh boy, like Drupal, I would say was back in like the Drupal 4, Drupal 5, 6, 7 days, Drupal was adopted a lot more by more of the SMB, I would call it, like more hobbyists, more, it wasn't quite as technically complex. You could run it, fairly lightweight. You just need a database. You need a, kind of core footprint of technology, but it wasn't too bad, right? Like I think, but as the time has gone on and it's embraced a lot more of like the modern PHP practices and things, that the Composer, code updates and Git and stuff like that, right? You end up kind of rolling more technical complexity, whether you like it or not, whether it's the right decision or not. I'm not taking any stance on that at all. But that complexity comes at a cost of I think, kind of cutting out a little bit of a, an easier, more straightforward path for people like hobbyists and things. The automatic updates, I think, is going to be fairly significant if it really lands on its goals well, right? If it can be usable and it's able to, provide a great experience, a low-tech experience, it can give people a way to update a Drupal site. I think it's going to be really good. You can probably use cheaper hosts to do that, right? Run it on just a basic, like I used to say, like, oh, like just can I spin up a basic GoDaddy host or something, right? And that was kind of my litmus test for like simplicity back in the day. And it wasn't totally easy to do that, especially in recent times. Like, you need to go and load Git. You don't have environments to deploy, stage changes and test them, right? So so I'm hoping it can get a little bit back to that if the experience is really good around it, but I don't think it's any small task either. So, it's something I think it's going to have to evolve with time, and obviously is could be a very significant impact if it's done well.
No, that's really true for any software, any product, right? You want to be available to the largest audience, right? So I think if automatic updates can help with that, that's great. And it's all about promoting it within the community and outside the community too. So cool. Awesome. So we'll move on to chapter 8. So go ahead, Adam. Kaza's also name is Adam. So go ahead, Adam.
One thing about the automatic updates. So it's kind of got a huge dependency on how people treat versioning, right? For your API breaking changes.
Yes.
So that's kind of hard to control, but that's like an education and a knowledge thing in the community. As people get better at that, that will become more stable and inherently better in and of itself. But if there's weakness in that and in the community, we're gonna have trouble with that. And there's nothing we can do about it.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think, a lot, I think that's going to come very front and center with most of like the Drupal hosting offerings, actually. People that have bought, the standard hosting offerings, and, those things aren't like, using that, right? They're not, they have their own opinions of, oh, I can deploy tags or branches to environments. Using automatic updates is not like, it has no bi-directional flow of a code deployment, right? There's you need an environment to run it. That environment needs to be the source of truth for the code, for everything, right? For this to work properly. And it needs to get back into anything else that you're using to maintain your code, right? I think it's a very low-tech way of doing it. If you don't have multiple environments, you have one production environment and you can run it on there, and maybe you're not even using Git or you're not even using code-based workflows, right? I feel like that might scratch that itch. But the second you introduce those things, this effort, I think, becomes extremely interesting. You might need more supporting tooling. Like, I know that I talked to Ted Bowman a while back, and he was like, oh, we're looking at making this extensible so that people could write, say an API to GitHub, right? And like let GitHub know, oh, hey, like here's new code. It's sitting here. How could you, go and deploy that or whatever? So there's a lot of different ways you can solve that, but it does introduce a significant amount of complexity that I think will change a lot based on people's specific implementations.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, thank you for that question, Adam. I think it's definitely a nuanced, especially when you're introducing something new like that, which you mentioned in the book, right? It's been available in WordPress for a while, right? And that's one reason that small businesses do go to WordPress, a lot of times. So I think there's definitely nuances when introducing something new like that. So cool. Thank you, Adam. All right, so yeah, let's move on to chapter 8, which is context structures and multilingual. I understand you have a background story with this. I think it goes back to your professor days. So go ahead and give us background on that.
Yeah, like one of my favorite topics whenever I was teaching was around database normalization. And there's all like normalization is like a very well documented thing. You can go find and read a whole Wikipedia page about it. But the whole like premise around it is really about how do you structure a database, a relational database to work properly? How do you like create tables, and how do you make fields atomic? And that's like the lowest possible denominator of like what is a value inside of a database table or row and things like that. And it talked all about how you do that, from more of like a computer science and sort of database level. And then you start introducing the stuff around keys and like linking to keys and foreign keys and relating data between tables and rows. And, I used to teach that all the time. It was like, such a fun like thing for me because I actually was only teaching entry level. So I'd have like, first level computer science students. I'd even have like business students that like were kind of like learning about, just Excel and like the basics of database stuff, because they do a lot with that too. And, much of it is around like, how do you not repeat information, right? How do you reuse it? How do you make sure that, you structure things in a way that's going to set you up for success to continue, to evolve the data structure and make sure things work properly. And, what's like wild to me, and I think probably what sort of like really, really gelled with me whenever I started doing Drupal is just how well it solves that problem, right? And it was something that I was like, oh yeah, I like, oh my God, I talk about this in my classroom all the time, right? And I just kind of were seeing those elements show up in Drupal, even dating back, back to the days of CCK. If anybody remembers that framework, yeah, it was. I was like, wow, this is just really nice and definitely like jived with me, and I was able to see the value of it immediately.
No, that's really cool. I think I like the example you gave in the book of the art of the newspaper example with like in the old school like flat files. Like it just CMSs have evolved so much, and I think you give really good context to that. So if you could kind of explain like how you mentioned Drupal's well positioned to do this really well. Can you kind of explain, give us an example of like how so?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think so. I mean, in today's terms, right, it really comes down a lot to like what the entity system is and, the fields. There's obviously like linking capabilities, like, there are field types that allow you to link to other entities and other examples. There's cardinality, which sort of abstract the like one-to-one, one-to-many types of relationships between entities. That's, also an interesting thing. But it represents pretty much like every aspect of, database design, in a lot of ways through its entity system, right? And all the entities that are in Drupal that are more like domain specific, like users and nodes and those types of things are all fieldable. So you can add your own data structures to them as well. You can extend and build user profiles or, create content types with their own structures, right? And it's a really nice kind of thing. And I think if you apply some of those, atomic principles and normalization principles and stuff, it kind of maps really well to what Drupal does. It's a strength of, the system. And I think that the thing that really, I think, kind of makes like Drupal really, really good too is it's actually like, it's not coding. It's not, you can do all of that through the UI. Yes, a site builder can pick it up and configure it, and extend. They even just redid the field UI. I think last week I saw a release on that through their usability efforts in the community. And you could pick what field type you want. It looks really nice. It shows an example of that. And those things work really well, and they're low technical barriers, right? You don't have to like develop it into your site. You can just log into the admin screens and click create a new content type and add a new field and pick what field type you want and fill out the settings for it. Like, so those are really good things. I remember way back in the day that, like, when I was doing this type of stuff and building custom apps, I would use stuff like PHPMyAdmin, and even like, I remember I had a class, in college on like, Microsoft Access, and like, those are, really like were designed to kind of do similar things, back in the day, right? Provide a nice UI and then run a database behind the scenes, So yeah.
No, it's cool. I this was actually one of my favorite chapters because I think the content on multilingual as well, which is super important to Drupal, and why a lot of companies, organizations choose Drupal is because of the multilingual capability. So definitely a chapter that you want to, when you guys get the book, definitely a chapter that you want to pay attention to. Cool, awesome. Well, we'll move into chapter 10, which is Drupal views and display modes. So yeah, can you give us an overview of this chapter and why this is one of the, probably the most important chapter, and why Drupal, the power of Drupal, really, the power behind Drupal, I should say. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like, it was probably the hardest chapter to write for me, maybe aside from the module development chapter, given I was like really rusty at like, looking at Drupal's APIs and stuff like that. And like, it took me quite a while, but I think, when you have such a complex topic and, it's very difficult to write about it in a straightforward way and like try to get it to an audience, like get it fit well for the audience that I was trying to serve. Even the definition of views is it's hard to define it, right? It's kind of like something you really like, once you get your hands on it and you try to like use it, you do tend to understand it a little bit better of what it's able to do and why it does what it does. But just, in the position of writing a book that has to outline a lot of this stuff, it was very, very challenging to do that well. So I think one of the goals I tried to do was try to put my own words around it, right? And in doing so, I described like the concept of like creating these dynamic displays and how, dynamic displays can mean a lot of different things, especially in a web application. It could be as simple as a listing that's on a page. It could be, its own page. It could be, a feed, like a web service feed, a JSON feed or something like that. And so I talked about how, all those things extend and sort of build on all the underlying content structures. So you have those foundationally, and then you can take those and you can take the content that you've built into your Drupal site, and you could basically, create all these different displays from it, right? And I even used and went back to some of like the normalization. And I talked about how, you probably remember this, Patrick, in the book, but I talked about how like you don't want to repeat the content. You don't want a content author who creates like a newsletter article to have to go and repeat the title and then put all the links everywhere all throughout the site. No, you want to be able to build that in a way that it's dynamic, that you have a listing, that listing automatically updates whenever you have another newsletter. And, and you want to make use of the same structured content, the same, content you've already entered. You don't want to repeat that content. So views is really the critical tool that like allows you to build all those different displays and not repeat yourself over and over and over again. And the same display can be placed, actually, this is really useful. The book talks a lot about context. That's one of like the the themes throughout the book that, you know, it kind of goes into many, many, many of the chapters. But one of the cool things about Drupal is that it's context aware, like depending on like the request you're making, the page you're going to, the parameters that you pass it, the domain that you're looking at, the language that you want to load, right? It has all these different ways of loading certain context that it makes it, you know, really easy to kind of add, you know, more dynamic functionality into the site, right? And so Views kind of builds on that, talks and says, okay, well, if you have this type of context, you can put in conditions into Views and it can process those, and talks a lot about the how extensible and sort of powerful that feature is. Yeah, aside from just building those displays and not repeating the content throughout the site.
Yep.
But I also paint a little bit of a dichotomy to like what I kind of make it a little bit of a simpler sort of reference where I said you can do a little bit of some changing of displays also through display modes, like if you're rendering a node or you know, doing that type of stuff, and or changing like display settings on a block. You can pick what display mode you want if it's like, you know, an associated thing back to like an entity. And so I talked about how those do get a little bit overlooked because, you know, Views is like a great feature and very powerful, but don't forget about display modes. Those things are really a great way for you to very rapidly configure different ways to change the ways that content gets rendered on the site, basically. And it's a nice, you know, nice feature that hopefully just doesn't, you know, doesn't get overlooked. So yeah.
Yeah, this is a chapter I'm going to revisit the most because is what I like initially read. I'm like, all right, this I'm going to have to revisit because it's such a complex topic, but it's so important to like you said, the power of Drupal. So cool, well, awesome, Adam. Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. I will open up for Q&A if anyone has any questions. But yeah, I think after we will definitely generate a list of places you can buy the book from. Instead of Amazon. So, but yeah, go ahead if anyone has any questions.
So I bought the book. Do I actually need to read it to get all this knowledge in my head?
Are you asking if you bought it that I owe you a personal favor, Jim?
No,
and you get consulting.
I'm hoping to get automatically smarter. Like maybe if I put it under my pillow.
I haven't heard that works yet.
How about an audio version of the book? Is that in the works?
I haven't heard about that either, actually. So I'm not sure. That's a good question. I'll have to reach out to the publisher. Yeah. I do know, like, I've asked even about different formats for like electronic delivery as well. Sure. Yeah, I'll have to go back and ask. I'm not even sure.
Yeah, I mean,
go ahead, Jim. Sorry.
I was just gonna say I've already used it as a reference. I'm like looking up a specific thing, but yeah, of course, finding time in modern life to sit down and read a book cover to cover sometimes is challenging.
Something you can do, Jim, and I use it from time to time. There's an app called Speechify. And like, say you buy the ebook like through Google Books or something, you can load that up in Speechify, and you can like even have Snoop Dogg read it to you if you want.
Oh, that's cool.
Super handy because I like audiobooks too. I like to listen, and I find if I'm reading, I start thinking about things. But if I'm listening, I can stay on track.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Yeah, that's a good tip.
Definitely relate to that, Jim. Like, yeah, it is hard to like I've enjoyed reading Adam's book, like having the book and reading it, but it like I have like 3 other books that I'm like halfway through that I was like, oh, I gotta like find a way to get through these. So I totally relate to that. So cool. Awesome. Any other questions?
It would be neat, like it's neat how Patrick, you guys decided to structure this where we focused on 3 chapters. I think that was a good idea, and maybe for people who are like Jim and myself, where we're like, well, how do we start? Like, do we just start at the beginning and read this book and we get smarter? But like maybe there is a way that we could break it down for people that really want to get the knowledge but they don't believe they have the ability to go and read a large book. Maybe there's like a bite-sized way, or like a Nerdstein a day type thing we could do. I know.
A day, but yeah, that's
Yeah.
cool.
Careful what you wish for, you know.
Yeah. I did enjoy your weekend thoughts while you were doing those on LinkedIn. Those were pretty nice.
Thank you. Yeah, I always enjoyed writing those. I was finding myself getting a little too stressed out writing a book and writing those on weekends. I was like, okay, this is too much. I should probably try to pick those back up now. But yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Very cool.
I did think about
Awesome.
maybe converting those into a book someday.
Cool.
That's a great idea. That's a great idea. Yeah. That's awesome. Cool. Awesome, room. Well, yeah. Cool.
Hey,
Jen,
thanks,
thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Adam, Rochelle, thank you guys for coming.
Thanks so much, guys.
See you, Jared.
All right.
Thank you for your help. All right. See you guys. Have a good one.
Take care. Thank you.
Bye.